Thank you, Ted. I have to tell you that when I've used all my best stuff already, so you're free to leave if you'd like to go ahead and go. It's one thing that's it's awkward is the more I do this is that, you know, when I started doing this 15 years ago, nobody had cell phones, nobody had cameras, things like that. And my first experience doing this was when a friend of mine, a doctor, asked me to come speak to her leadership group. And this was a good while ago, and I was a little reluctant to do it. I thought, hey, you want me to talk about banking and we talk about finance? I don't want to talk about that. I got to do that all day, every day. Name's Ann Penny, and I said, well, we finally decided that I would talk about leadership. Coaching is a model for leadership. And I was living in Auburn, Alabama back then. I don't remember who the coach was, but I'm pretty sure I didn't use him as an example. That was a joke. I'm sorry, sir. I actually went to a lot of Auburn games and pulled for them for a long time until I had a conversion experience. So anyway, Dr. Penny would call me, and we were working on how to go, you know, for what I was supposed to do. And I was the president of this little bank down in Auburn, Alabama. And I'd talk to her one day, and then I'd go tell my secretary that, you know, I've got to go see Dr. Penny, and I'll be back in an hour. And then I'd come back in, and she'd call. And one day, Beth, my secretary, who's about, you know, she's about 5 feet tall, barely, and she walked in my office and she said, Mr. Owens, I'm worried about you. And I said, well, Beth, that's kind. What is it you're worried about me? And she said, well, I know you've been going to see Dr. Penny a lot. You've been talking to her a lot, and I'm concerned about that. And the reason she was concerned was because Dr. Penny was the executive director of the East Alabama Mental Health Organization. So she was concerned something was going on, and I probably could have benefited from some of her teachings at the time. But anyway, we got to do that. And I have to tell you that when Ted asked me, he called me and left me a message. He just said, Mr. Ted Phillips, would you please call me back? And I did. And I have to admit, the first thought I had was, God, did I pay my power bill? I was like, because I travel some, and every now and then I get a little busy, and I've gotten one of those sweet little love letters once before in my life when I walked in the front door, and it said, you know, kind of one of those pay now or sit in the dark for a week, and I don't want to sit in the dark.
We'll get you on a bank draft before you leave.
That's right. That's right. So I'm Jim Owens. I'm here today for you guys. One of the things that I learned from Vinny Bowles, who I've heard has spoken to you before, Vinny talks about, as a speaker, you need to be there for the group, not for yourself. And so I'm here for you, not for myself. I really got up this morning, and you know, it was pouring down rain when I walked down on the porch, and I thought, you know, I just don't know how these guys are going to be. And I can already tell you're alert, you're engaged, and I appreciate it very much. So when I get to talk to groups, I often talk about leadership, I talk about change, I talk about resiliency. And this morning we're going to talk a little bit about leadership, and we're going to talk about resiliency and how to build it. So what I hope to do is entertain you a little bit, maybe I've done that already, educate you a little bit, and challenge you to ask some questions about your own life. You're going to get a little different take on this idea of leadership from a different perspective. And I would ask you, first of all, what do you think leadership is? Anybody want to take a stab at it? I think Tim probably does. Tony? Are you sure it's not Tim? You told me it was earlier. You're messing with me. Tony, I am so sorry. Is there a Tim in the room? Tim, would you answer? What do you think leadership is? What do you think of when you think of leadership?
Someone that can guide their people to do the best job available.
That's great. Guide their people to do the best job available. That's a great definition. Tony, that'll teach you. So I think leadership's influence. It's not a position. It's the ability to influence people around you to live better lives, to be more productive, to be more content, to enjoy life more, to be invested in their life. So that's how I come to you today. And And I'm here for you, but I have to tell you a little bit about me, if you'll just bear with me for just a minute or two, because I really think that when people understand, it's easy to be perceived when you're in front of an audience that maybe you have it all together. So I'm walking this journey with you, and I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you. Right? That's the difficult thing about being a speaker, is you're driving in the car, you're getting ready, you're waving your hands, people, you're talking, you're preparing, the lady next to you is staring, when you're stopped at a traffic light. But you have to get ready and you have to be prepared to talk about things that meet people where they are. And my guess is all of you have had some trauma and some tribulation in your life and some difficult times. And if you haven't, you probably will at some point in life. Most of us underestimate the number of challenges we're going to face in life. Scott Peck said in a book, I think the three most profound first three words of a book in The Road Less Traveled is life is difficult. There are times when it's very difficult. And so a year or so ago, actually last August, I bought a new house. In September I walked outside to cut my grass. I pulled the lawnmower because I'd failed. I pulled the cord because I'd failed to charge up the battery in the thing. Note to self, make sure the battery's charged. Pulled it once, pulled it twice, pulled it three times, felt something in my lower back. And I thought, man, that ain't good, whatever that is, because I'd already had 2 back surgeries. Finished cutting the grass and barely could get it, and I was actually not living in the house yet. I could barely get in my car and drive home. And by that night, I was in the ER. By the way, Dilaudid, not a bad thing. Opioids, I'm a fan, at least at that point. Not for recreational use, but for pain. Because we are on film. Americans, they save their medicine for when they're well, right? So that you can take. So I end up in the ER. I get great, treatment for the night. Get to the doctor the next day, MRI, the whole 9 yards. From Sunday to Thursday, I'm in surgery for the 3rd time on my back. This is the 2nd one on the same disc, which is a bad thing to have happen. And for the next 6 weeks, I was out of work and in intense pain. At 29, I had a surgery on Thursday and I went to work on Monday. At about 40, I had a surgery on Tuesday and I went back on Friday. But at 50 a lot, I went to have the surgery, and it was 6 weeks later. And I would get up in the mornings and I would walk into the bathroom or hobble into the bathroom to try to get a shower because the pain from the surgery, I thought, this has not gone right. Something's wrong here. And it was just the doctor kept saying, no, this is a part of the process. You have to trust the process. And I said, what, you listen to Nick Saban? and so I would look in the mirror and I would go, who in the world is that person I'm staring at? There was an old man staring me back in the face, a tired guy, a guy who was thinking, what is the rest of my life going to be like if I'm going to go through this again? If I'm going to be like this the rest of my life. It wasn't a pleasant thought because 2 weeks earlier, I'd been riding my mountain bike, I'd been working out in the gym, I like to backpack, I like to hike. So not only was I struggling with the surgery issue, I was struggling with the notion of who I was versus who I might be now. And it scared the daylights out of me. So fast forward the tape a little further to this May. As a result of the handiwork I did with the lawnmower, I also managed to finish tearing the labrum in my right hip. And I had torn it sufficiently to where now I have a brand new hip. So I had 2 major surgeries in less than 7 months. Not pleasant. Not pleasant. So now's where you all go, aww. That really didn't feel right. But I'll take it. So good news is I've recovered. We're going to come back to all that in just a minute. But when we talk about leadership and we talk about resiliency and what it is to be a resilient person, that whole experience challenged me in ways I'd never been challenged before. So when I talk to people about leadership being its influence, it's helping people do a better job, it's helping people lead better lives, one of the things I tell people is not everyone is called to the kind of sacrifice and world-changing type of activity. Let's say Mother Teresa, we all know who Mother Teresa is, right? She served the sick and poor and dying in Calcutta. We're not all called to that. A need is not necessarily a call for you to lead. Leadership can be things that you do right here this morning. It could be how you walk in a room and brighten it. Or in some cases, how you walk out of a room and brighten the one you just left, right? I mean, there are people like that in our lives. Leadership is the ability to kind of anticipate the future that people want to lead, the lives they want to lead, and help them get there. It's about helping other people. Zig Ziglar said that if you help, you can have anything in the world you want if you just help everyone else get what they want. I think that's pretty profound. And so you have the opportunity every day to do that. But with the challenges that you face, the journey that you're on, and I keep using the word journey because the book I brought this morning is a journey about a young man who has to decide what kind of person he wants to be after a fairly traumatic experience. He has to decide how he wants to respond to the world, and quite frankly, he doesn't respond very well early on in his life. So you have the chance in your difficulties and your trials to respond rather than react. And I just, yeah, right. Thank you, Tony. Yesterday I was talking to a group. You'll get a kick out of this. I'm talking, I'm engaged, and there's a big old guy in the corner, and he's looking at his phone. He goes, no, right in the middle of my talk. And of course, and so he's not here today. I was a little concerned. But of course, it was an interesting point of engagement if you're a speaker. And one of those moments where you go, am I boring them to death or what? And he'd run into a challenge. He'd run into something that he had just seen on his phone that was going to be a trial for him. So we took a minute and we talked to him and encouraged him, and then we asked him to leave the room. Again, a joke. Thank you. So he was facing a trial. And so I asked myself, and I ask you today, how do you prepare to lead in difficult times? How do you prepare to respond to the things in your life rather than react? Reaction is a little kid sees a ball going through the street, and what does he do? He chases it, right? A response is he walks up to the curb, he looks left, he looks right. Wait a minute, is that the right way? You look left and right? Yeah, okay. We're not in Europe. So he looks left, and then he walks out to retrieve the ball. But we're so caught up in our activity and in the noise of our world, we're not human doings. What are we? We're human beings. So what I like to talk to people about in my organizational development practice, in culture work that I do in companies, and in one-on-one coaching with people, is I like to talk to them about the difference between your who and your do. You see, all the things in your life that are your do, right, the things that are waiting on you, the list of things, right, all of you have things on your mind right now. You're either faking it really well by paying attention to me, or your minds are somewhere else thinking about what you got to do today, what you're going to do this weekend, what football games you're going to watch. Have you got the chicken wings and the beer and the Coke and all the things that you need? Or I've got to get out of here and I've got to write that report. And we stop being human beings. We're wrapped up in being human doings. So how do we fix that? So this is where it's a little different, where I'm a little different as a speaker. Because oftentimes as leadership speakers go, and they're all brilliant, many of them are brilliant, Vinny's particularly brilliant. Following him, I'm kind of like, ay. If you pay attention to your heart. Now I'm not talking about the thing that throbs in your chest. I'm talking about your mental, your physical, your spiritual, and your emotional substance. All the things that add up to who you are. And even from a young age, many of us have that drummed out of us, right? We have expectations from our parents, from our friends, and from that little voice inside our head that says, I should be a certain way. I used to describe myself as, and I still do this sometimes, as a trained circus monkey, right? If you'll just throw me a peanut, I'll do whatever it takes to make you like me. But perhaps that's because I'm an only child.
Me too.
Are you? I knew I liked you, Tony.
I love you.
Even though your name's not Tim. By the way, I haven't told you all, I typically, apparently it's come out before, this is usually what I call the baptismal row. Because when I get really excited, I spit. So if you see you're nodding like I've already done it. Have I done it already? So, and she won't say anything. What's your name? Melissa. See me after the meeting, okay? But you have to pay attention to your heart. You have to pay attention. And oftentimes leadership is service, right? We can describe a servant leader. And I think that's brilliant, that we do serve one another. You know, when we die, most of us are not going to lay on our deathbeds and want our plaques and our trophies and our high school ring and our letter jackets or whatever. That's not what we're going to want around us. We're going to want the people that we care about to be with us and to remember us well. And we're imperfect at it, and people will remember us differently than we want to be remembered sometimes. But you have the opportunity right now to start changing any of those things that you might want to change by paying attention to your heart. By not just serving other people, not being selfish, but serving yourself. You see, by serving yourself, by paying attention to what's going on with your body. Now, I'm not here to tell everybody that you should lose 50 pounds and go work out, but here's what are some of the things that I think you should think about. Sleep. How many of you got 7 to 8 hours of sleep last night? Great. Some of you are catching up right now. I can tell. 7 to 8 hours of sleep is what most of us need. And as a community of Americans, we don't get that much sleep on average. We struggle. But there are things you can do to help yourself sleep better. You can turn off the television at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, or maybe even 9 o'clock. You can have an established time to go to bed. You can turn off what's the last thing you do before you go to bed? Most of you. The last thing before you turn the light out, be honest. Check your phone, right? First thing you do when you get up? Check your phone, right? Because something important might have happened in the middle of the night. I might have finally won that $1 million that Nigerian prince that was going to send me $1 million by email has finally figured out how to get it to me. Sleep, and the amount of sleep you get, is heavily related to morbidity. It's one of the defining factors of just how long you're going to be here on this planet. It affects your creativity. It affects your energy. Patton said, I think it was Patton, I've said things before and I've been corrected. So if I'm wrong, I apologize, but the notion here is that what he said, or whoever said it, is that fatigue makes cowards of us all. Right? When you're tired, late Friday afternoon, when I was married, and I was married for a long time to a wonderful woman who I have great respect for, we had an agreement. I didn't come home on Friday afternoon until I had a snack, because I was tired and I was usually hungry. And when I'm tired and hungry, I'm not very fun to be around. So our diet, what we eat, affects our body. When we eat affects our body. It affects how we feel. It affects our creativity. It affects our mental acuity. It affects our attitude. And I was raised by a father who said attitude is everything. He's 85 years old and he still has a great attitude. He has a benign brain tumor. He's got about 6 or 7 doctors. He's suffered from a chronic and debilitating autoimmune disorder. But the guy is still, right now he's in Ellicott, Maryland with a bunch of friends. He's still traveling with my mother. He goes to Alabama basketball games every time they play at home games. His attitude is, I can either sit here and be in pain and have difficulty, or I can go be around people and influence them and encourage them. And most of his friends are my age. He says, I don't want to go with the Sunshine or the Sunrise group on the church trip. What do I want to be around a bunch of old people for, right? He's 85 years old. And so he and my mother go do these things together. He takes as much care of himself as he can. So sleep and your diet and your routines can dramatically impact your productivity. If you pay attention to yourself spiritually, and I don't just mean going to church or going to synagogue or going to your mosque or however you worship in whatever faith tradition you're in. I'm talking about your inside life, your inner life, what goes on inside of you. It could be meditation. It could be being in nature. It could be walking through the woods and listening to the birds sing. It could be listening to music. How many of you love music, right? Have you ever been moved to tears by a piece of music?
Yep.
I have too. It's pretty remarkable. That is a spiritual experience. It enriches our lives. And because what we're after, how many of you have heard this term balance? I want to live a balanced life. For me, that's been nonsense. What I'm trying to do is find harmony between my spiritual, my emotional, my physical, and my mental life. And try to build my life around that and let my to-dos flow out of that. So spiritually, you can practice a number of different things that will fill you up in ways. But if you're not taking the time, if you're not doing the self-care that you need to do, if you're always leading other people and you're always putting all your energy some of you are caregivers, I'll bet, to aging and ailing parents. It's exhausting. The burnout, the frustration, the fact that sometimes the parent who loved you and raised you and that you love desperately no longer knows who you are. I've been down that road with a grandmother. And I wasn't the primary caregiver, but it was horrible. It was horrible to watch this kind woman be angry and do things that we knew was not her. But if we don't pay attention to our spiritual lives, then we don't have the resources to care for other people. If we don't get rest when we're talking about our physical activity, we're not going to be prepared. And mentally, this is the thing that I find intriguing about life. Now, as a writer and a voracious reader, it's remarkable to me that something like 20 to 25% of Americans, after they graduate from high school, never read another book. Never read another book. And if you don't like to read, fine. But you can listen to Audible. You can listen to podcasts. There are things you can do in your mind to sharpen it, to help you be prepared, because trust me, the things you know today, some of you have a lot of track left ahead of you in your careers and in your life. The skills you have today are not adequate for what life's going to be 10 or 15 or 20 years from now. Now, I have a goal. I'm going to live to be 100 years old. I'm going to be a burden to my children. I've decided. I told that to my father-in-law, who passed away about 10 or 15 years ago, 10 years ago now. I love the man dearly. A voracious Auburn football fan. Loved it. He did not see the national, he didn't live to see the national championship. By the way, I would tell you this. What do you think the first question is I'm usually asked when I come speak to a group?
Auburn or Alabama?
Pardon?
Auburn or Alabama?
No, not that one. No.
Who are you? Where you from?
No, that's not it either. Come on. How tall are you? I'm 6'7". Melissa, would you like to ask me how much I weigh? Please do. I weigh 245 pounds. Cam Newton, 6'7", 245. World class, why are you laughing, sir? World class athlete's body right here, right here. It's all just kind of proportioned differently. And I've completely lost my train of thought, so hopefully that was worth it. If we don't take care, excuse me, of ourselves mentally, to be prepared for the skills that we're going to need in life later on. You know, the demographics of the United States, we're getting older. I'm a baby boomer. I'm on the tail end of the baby boom. It's affecting housing. It's affecting the choices of the people behind me. People are buying smaller houses. They're waiting later to buy them. They're waiting later for their children to be born, to do the things that they do. And we are becoming, and this is not a political statement, this is a fact, in 25 years, white men will be a minority. White people will be a minority because of and I'm not talking politics here. I'm just talking about the plain, simple fact that maybe if you can't speak Spanish, you might need to learn how. Right? I've been trying to learn how for a long time. I've figured this out. Una cerveza, por favor. Más tequila, por favor. Right? Una mesa para dos, and ¿dónde están mis pantalones? Which means, where are my pants? We don't all have the skills we need to live the lives we desire to live. Now, my job has been to talk for 20 or 30, and I should have worn my watch, but Ted, would you just be kind enough to tell me, am I done? Is it getting close to where I'm supposed to be done?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Good, I felt it. I felt it. The thing I want to leave you with today and wrap this up with is, how did I get through the trauma and the struggle that I had last fall and early this year. And if I hadn't been prepared, and I didn't really even realize I was preparing, I was just trying to live life the way I felt was best for my heart. I had friends who brought me food, who brought me meals, and took me to the doctor with no expectation of anything in return when I was stranded at the Artisan Apartments. And by the way, I had Hemsey come pick me up after the surgery because it was about 5 in the morning and I was having what they call breakthrough pain. And I thought, I need some more of that Dilaudid stuff. And I managed to drive myself there to actually this was like 2 o'clock in the morning now I think about it. I managed to drive, I called Hemsey, they came and got me. I'm 6'7", the gurney fits people about 6'5", so the guy put me on the gurney and he goes, "You hanging off at both ends." They got me there, but I had friends who took care of me, who looked after me, who texted me and called me, who told me to put the phone down, not to write any more emails or post any more pictures on Instagram while you're taking Percocet. Because apparently I wrote some epic emails. The people I worked with stepped up and said, "Don't come to work." My boss told me, "Don't come to work. Don't come back too early." I had spent a good bit of time preparing, unbeknownst to me, for this trial because I like to meditate. I'm not a chanter. I don't think I'm, lighting incense and doing all that kind of stuff. But if that's your thing, have at it. But I learned, and it's very difficult to meditate when you're in pain. And so you know what you do? You meditate on the pain. You just acknowledge it. You go, "Man, that burns, burning, aching, throbbing." Instead of focusing on, am I ever going to be able to do the things I used to do? I had a rich spiritual life. I had books to read. I looked at that time and I said, I'm going to take this time and invest it for a return so that when I'm out of here, maybe I can share this experience with other people. And vocationally and mentally, I was able to learn some new things that hopefully will equip me for the future. Life is difficult. Leadership isn't always fun. Sometimes it feels like, man, I'm going for a long walk and nobody's following. Well, maybe if you'll take the time, and a woman asked me yesterday, well, how do you lead people who are leaders? I said, you ask them what's important to them. And that's really, to me, the two questions I would leave you with today are to ask yourself, what's important to me? And I guess maybe three. What's important to me? What do I need to do to find harmony in my life? And what's important to the people around me? And if you'll do those things, you'll serve yourself, you'll be a more effective leader, and you'll have a lot more fun. And I've had fun this morning. Thank you very much for your attention. I know it's an early Friday morning in tropical North Alabama. And I'm going to go home and make sure I paid my power bill this month. So, thank you.